take, make, use, and dispose. It's the traditional model of our global economy. It's how it's operated for generations. But now there's a plastic soup in the ocean that's causing untold damage to wildlife and growing challenges posed by climate change, as we were just hearing from Ted Danson in the previous session. It's making companies and communities around the world try to transition to a circular economy, which tries to curb the use of resources and the production of waste. I'm Jess Shankleman, a journalist at Bloomberg Green, and I'm joined by a formidable panel of experts in this area to talk about how the circular economy requires rethinking and how we produce products and changing consumer behaviour. So I'm joined by Ellen Jackowski, Chief Sustainability Officer and Chief Social Impact Officer of HP, John Burke, President of Trek Bicycle, Janis Searles Jones, CEO of the Ocean Conservancy, and Dune Ives, Executive Director of the Lonely Whale. Janis, I want to start by asking you a little bit about the science behind this. So research in July by the Pew Foundation found the annual flow of plastics in our oceans is on a path to triple over the next 20 years, which could add to 110 pounds of plastic trash for every metre of coastline worldwide. But having reported in this area for 10 years, I feel like we're often getting science like this. What does this particular research add to our existing knowledge of plastic waste and the need for a circular economy? How much do we really know, and how quickly is the science evolving? Janis, can you hear me? Oh, I think we've lost her. June, do you want to take a go at the question?
I'd be happy to answer the question. It's a really important question. So prior to the Pew Charitable Trust report that came out this summer, what we knew is that between 8 and 12 million metric tons of new plastic waste was entering the ocean. This is the result of over 350 million tons of new plastic being produced every single year globally, and we only recycle just under 9% of that. Those numbers fluctuate from year to year, but in general, only 9% of plastic ever produced has been recycled. What Pew's report demonstrated is that if we continue on this path, and it's a path of upward trajectory, upward growth for the plastic industry, we will likely see 29 million metric tons of new plastic entering the ocean by the year 2040, which is not that far away. Now, these are all pre-pandemic figures. So we know since COVID-19 hit, monthly, we are using 129 billion non-recyclable face masks and 65 billion non-recyclable plastic gloves. Some of those are already entering in the waterways. So the estimates from Pew, I think one can assume that perhaps they're conservative. But what I will say, just to kind of not have so much doom and gloom to start this is a very solvable issue. Unlike a lot of the issues that we deal with on a daily basis, our plastic pollution crisis is truly solvable. And I think I'm looking forward to the conversation about how we do that today.
Absolutely. One of the difficulties of talking about the environment is you do have to talk about the problems before you get to the solutions. We used to joke about having a apocalypse correspondent, because there's always really difficult stories to write, but you kind of want to get to the great, fantastic stories about the technology and the ideas that are going to solve this. But you touched on the pandemic, and I just want to know, it seems like it's kind of exposed flaws in the system that we have. Would you agree with that? I see Janis has just joined us again. Can you hear us?
I can. I'm sorry. We're having trouble with internet in Oregon here right now.
We're all constantly battling with IT. We were just talking about how the pandemic exposed flaws in the system. Do you think that is the case?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, one of the things that's been interesting about COVID is it's really shown across a bunch of different dimensions of our society where we have gaps, and you've seen that in particular around healthcare. You've seen that around waste management as well. We estimate that we've used about 129 billion face masks and about 65 billion gloves over the course of the pandemic globally, and we're already starting to see more and more of those face masks and those gloves in anecdotal data as we're cleaning up beaches around the world. And so as the economic impact has really challenged recycling systems as well, you're seeing those smaller businesses that used to do some of this collection and some of this waste management start to really struggle from the economic impacts of COVID. And then you're seeing this increase in use of single-use plastics for health reasons, really overwhelming the system as well.
And
But it's a
Jess,
real
I think
challenge,
the other
isn't it?
thing we're seeing during this time as well is that the price of oil continues to go down. And so as the price of oil continues to go down, there's the correlated desire to see more plastic production as a growth market for the oil and gas industry. So I think in addition to what Janis said, we're starting to see, some targeted efforts to see how can we increase production and how can we perhaps stop the ban on bans around plastic bag bans, especially slowing those down, trying to reverse them. So it's definitely an industry in crisis right now. And I think that's also another area that's been exposed during COVID-19.
So we actually took a poll of our audience via Twitter and email, and the results were a little bit surprising. So I'd like to get your thoughts. So the question was, will efforts to combat climate change be accelerated or slowed because of COVID-19? And 36% of respondents said they thought they'd be slowed, and 45% thought they'd be accelerated. So more thought they'd be accelerated. Ellen and John, does that, or I'll ask Ellen first of all, does that track with what you're seeing in the work with your customers?
Well, I think it does track with what we're seeing from our customer insights point of view, but more importantly, it's clear that companies like HP that operate at the scale that we do, we have a $50 billion supply chain, we've made a lot of big commitments to eliminate plastic from our packaging. We have a goal to eliminate 75% of single-use plastic from our packaging. We have a goal to use 30% recycled plastic in our products by 2025. Now in this moment, with these shifts happening that Dune and Janis just described, this is when companies like HP have to continue to work aggressively towards the goals they set. Do not take our foot off the pedal. Continue to accelerate that and provide that sense of stability for the recycling industry, that we are going to continue to buy that recycled plastic. We need continued recycling infrastructure. So it's a very critical moment, I think, for companies like HP to step up and provide some of that certainty to these bigger goals. This is a problem that we don't have a choice. We have to solve it.
Because you're actually in the middle, HP is in the middle of quite a big project in Haiti at the moment. Is that right? Where you invested last year $2 million to expand your ocean-bound plastic supply, including a new washing line in Haiti, which I have to admit, when I first read that, I imagined a washing line that you hang your clothes on, but it's not that, is it?
Yeah, no,
and how's that?
Think about that.
How's that project been going? Has it been held up by the pandemic?
Well, initially, so we've been in Haiti since 2016. We set a vision to start using ocean-bound plastic to create some of our products. We started with the HP Ink Cartridge because for over 15 years, we'd already been using plastic bottles, recycled plastic bottles, to create those cartridges. And we started thinking about an expanded procurement strategy where we could have more environmental as well as social impact by expanding to a location like Haiti, where instead of buying these recycled plastic bottles off of the North American plastic market, we could be more pointed in where we're procuring them from to stop those bottles from flowing in the ocean and instead put them in our products. So we've to date used about 60 million bottles, upcycled them, procured them from Haiti, put them into our products. Now it's not just only our ink cartridges, but we've scaled across our PC portfolio. We have the world's first notebook with ocean-bound plastic, workstation, Chromebook, desktop. So this has been a really big focus for us. We figured out how to do it, and we're continuing to scale. So that $2 million washing line was us saying we are going to continue to think about how to disrupt what we've been doing to do it in a much more sustainable way. And that washing line, although it sounds like something you might hang your clothes on, instead, it's really almost like this huge factory. We have some pictures you can find on the internet of what this thing looks like. It's a very technical, complicated piece of equipment. It washes that dirty plastic that's picked up from the beaches and the waterways in Haiti. There's a lot of sediment and dirt. it cleans that off so there are no contaminants when we mix it with our other recycled, for example, ink cartridge plastic when we go to make new products. So that type of initiative was facing stalling during COVID. We had shipped the washing line down to Haiti. It was in place in February. We had an install team set to start creating it, putting it together. They couldn't fly. They were in Germany and Montreal. So for a while, we kind of banged our heads against the wall saying, what are we going to do? But it's clear again, this problem, as Dune and Janis just mentioned with the statistics, it's only accelerating. So we had to figure out how to get around this no travel situation. So using remote technology and a series of high-def cameras that we set up in our factory in Haiti, we had the install team in Germany and Montreal in the US zoom in every morning with some workers on the ground that we were able to hire. They never assembled anything like this washing line, but we had the eyes, across the world with the install education and knowledge, directing the hands on the ground in Haiti. And very excited to say we've been able to build that washing line during this time and overcome a lot of the continued obstacles that keep coming our way.
And I was quite interested as to why you chose Haiti as well, because you could have chosen somewhere that was a lot less vulnerable to extreme weather events, where you knew your supply chain was potentially a bit more secure. How did you go about making the business case for that?
Yeah, well, and mentioning those extreme weather events, Tropical Storm Laura, before it was a hurricane, came through Haiti. It knocked out one of the bridges to our plants. So we're very aware of the environmental risks and some of the challenges of choosing to do this specifically in a location like Haiti. It's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Unemployment is staggering. But by us being involved there, we are working to change that together. I live in California. We've got wildfires to the northeast and south of my home. This weekend I've been stuck inside the whole time because the air quality is so bad. These challenges that we are facing across the world, we can't stop. We can't stop what we're doing to find solutions and to innovate our way out of these problems. So in choosing Haiti, that was a location that was in the same hemisphere as our recycler and compounder in Montreal. So it seemed like, at least from a transportation point of view, close enough. And then, of course, we found some incredible partners down in Haiti to work with. We could not be doing this work alone. It takes a village of competencies, and we found an NGO and another partner down there who could bring capabilities to, our knowledge of how to bring world-class supply chain effectiveness down into Haiti. So that's why we've chosen there, and we're going to continue to scale.
There's some really incredible things being done by companies in this area. But John, I wanted to ask you about the policy response, because it seems to me that there's a handful of countries that are doing some things, like, for example, here in the UK, the government's banned plastic straws. And I think the EU has put forward a circular economy package that tries to deal with all sorts of different issues, like inbuilt obsolescence, like why we always have to replace our mobile phones every year because they're no longer the most fashionable thing, or they're no longer working so well. But why do you think it is? When I speak to people from all parts of my life, people just don't like seeing plastic everywhere. And increasingly, they hate the idea of it. But governments don't seem to be acting in line with that consumer demand. Why do you think we're not seeing that from governments when businesses are?
I think that's a great question. I think it goes back to your earlier question on the pandemic. Is the pandemic good, or is it bad when you're taking a look at sustainability? And I actually think that it can be good, because I think we're working in an age of ineffective government. We've seen in the United States specifically just poor leadership in dealing with the pandemic. And I think what citizens are awakening to is that good government matters, and that the government needs to have vision, and the government needs to be on these bigger issues. If you see the wildfires in Australia last year, if you see what's going on in California now, if you see 500-year floods over a 3-year period of time in Houston, Texas, I mean, climate change is happening now, and it's only going to get worse unless governments step up. We hear that HP is stepping up, Trek is doing a lot, but in the end, governments need to step up. They need to legislate things, and there really needs to be a sense of urgency. I mean, we go through these political campaigns where we talk about useless issues, and here we have the biggest issue of our time, and nobody's talking about it. It drives me nuts.
But you have been at Trek Bicycles, you have been doing some things. You've started replacing injection molded plastic products with those from reclaimed fishing nets. How did you go about making that decision to do that? Did it cost you more money?
You know, about a year and a half ago, I was watching a documentary, Above and Beyond, by Rory Kennedy, and it was about NASA. It starts out about NASA, and about 25% of the way through the documentary, it starts talking about the environment, and it starts showing parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. And it's a pretty flat line for about 1,500 years, and then it just spikes up. And it shows, you know, the planet over the last 120 years, the temperature has gone up 2 degrees. If our body temperatures went up 2 degrees, we'd be sick. And that's where the planet is today. So I came back to Trek and I said, listen, we run an OKR process here. And we said, our objective is we're going to be an environmentally friendly company fast. And that was cascaded through the organization. We have over 500 projects that are going on in order to make a difference now. And we need to be doing more, but I'm really proud of all the things that we've accomplished, and we have a long way to go.
And
Jess,
June,
could
you
I pick
mentioned,
up on two of the things there?
of course, please do.
Yeah, I really want to commend both HP and Trek for all of the work that they have done, and also observe and endorse what you just said about having broader policy tools too. If you look at all of the commitments from the private sector and governments right now from a circular economy for plastics perspective, there's only about a 7% reduction of what we expect to happen with plastics over the next 20 years. And so it definitely is an important contribution, but without that larger policy framework that science needs to drive, we're not going to be able to scale up across the entire plastic supply chain. And so all this innovation you're seeing inside these individual companies is incredibly important and needs to be embraced far more broadly by the sector as a whole. And I completely agree with the policy framework needs to be put into place to actually have a meaningful contribution across the entire supply chain and to really reshape the global plastic supply chain. And the other thing I'll just add, we've all been circling back to climate change, and there's a very real reason for that. 99% of plastics are made from petroleum products. Plastics in the ocean, which is the thing that we're primarily interested in, is really a slow motion oil spill. And so talking about plastics, petrochemicals, fossil fuel industry, and plastic pollution and carbon pollution really do end up being one and the same, and thinking about how we get to a circular economy for plastics while actually reducing plastics overall and reducing plastic emissions is a really important piece of the puzzle for a circular economy for plastics. And it would be great if we could talk about that a little bit more too.
Well, is it right that as we move away from using fossil fuels in our energy supply, that's having an impact on the plastics market, that there's more oil going into making plastics as they can't supply our electricity anymore?
Yeah, as Dune mentioned, petrochemicals is a real growth industry for fossil fuels. We move away from burning fossil fuel. You're seeing increasing investment by the sector in cracker facilities and petrochemical facilities. They are energy intensive, they're emission intensive, and they're projected to grow a huge amount over the next 30 years. And if plastics production continues on a business as usual trajectory, plastics will take up about 13 to 15% of global emissions by 2050. So it's definitely something we need to confront as a society now, and the plastics and carbon issues are really inextricably linked.
So if there was one thing you could do tomorrow or today to make a difference, to make the biggest impact possible, what would it be?
I would love to say there's one thing to do. The thing with plastics is there is no silver bullet. There's no one single thing to do. And that's actually good because there are a lot of things we can do. Reduction and substitution is a huge part of the puzzle. And I think for everyone listening to this and all the different businesses who are already committing to do good things in their plastic supply chain, thinking about the end of your product or your packaging as you're actually deciding what materials to use and what design you are using is incredibly important. So reduction and substitution is huge. Really investing in collecting and recycling and only making materials that are reusable and recyclable is the second huge wedge there. Continuing to support the science and the policy development. There are some good things in play in the United States and certainly internationally and at the state level too that would move toward higher recyclability standards, higher recycled content standards, and then continuing to support cleanups and conversion of all of those ocean-bound plastics into durable materials is a really great thing as well.
And Jess, if I could, I would just add one thing. I agree with everything Janis just said. And I think if we could have 1,000 more companies like Trek and HP who are the true heroes in this plastic pollution crisis, that would also be an important step. But it's the price of virgin plastic polymers that are a real problem. With the price of oil continuing to decrease or fluctuating on the low level, we're only going to continue to see more demand for cheap plastics. And this is not consumer driven, this is profit driven. So if we're going to make a real difference, we have to have that price of virgin plastic polymer reflect the true cost and the true impact that it's having on the environment. And this is not a new conversation. This is a conversation that's been happening in the climate arena for many years, way too many years. As John mentioned, we've known about this for a very, very long time, but it really comes down to pricing. So if we have more companies buying more recycled plastic content, choosing that over virgin plastic polymers, and understanding that that's going to change the price of the products that ultimately we purchase as consumers, that's a step forward. There's probably also some policy schemes that we need to start thinking about to make sure that the price of virgin plastic polymers reflect that true cost, which today they don't. It's difficult for recycled plastic to be cost competitive. And then even more so with ocean-bound plastic, which is a question, Jess, you asked earlier, of price parity. When do we get to price parity with ocean-bound plastics? Many of the companies are getting there now, but it's taking quite a bit of investment. It's taking a lot of time and effort, and we need to have policies that reflect this effort to really match the company's earnestness and the intentions that they have.
Would a global carbon price make a difference, or would you require some other kind of market mechanism?
Well, I'm not an economist by training, so I'm not sure I'm the most qualified to answer that question. I know they're tricky. They're very tricky. There's been a voluntary scheme that's been floated that I think has gotten a little bit of traction, and Janis might be able to speak more into that, with the CPG companies calling for an increase in the pricing of virgin plastic polymers to make recycled plastic more competitive, so we can keep these recycling facilities open and we can keep ensuring that there are buyers for the material that is more expensive at end of life. But I'm sure that there is a host of policy schemes that need to be considered.
John, I think you were going to chip in with something then.
I think one thing I'd like to add is that, when we started this journey at Trek, which was not too long ago, we really challenged our people. And I believe that companies could probably do 100 times more than they're doing today. And I think employees for every company should demand of their management and their CEO, what's our plan? And I think, we're at the beginning here, and there's so much more that we can do. But if you take a look at our bikes, we ship a lot of bikes. And we went into that bike box and we figured out there are 28 different pieces of plastic. It took us about a year, but we've knocked that down to 2 pieces. We went from 28 to 2, and our goal is to get it down to 0. We're re-looking at every single package that we ship in this company, and everything can be improved, everything can be altered. And it all depends on what you deem is important. And to us, the future of the planet is important. And I just can't imagine any company out there who wouldn't come to that same conclusion. But I think it really is dependent on global leadership to make this ask of companies.
And I would just say I agree with that. And I think we see that energy inside our own employee base. critically looking at our leadership team, at our supply chain leaders, at our product designers, questioning, why are you choosing that material? Can we swap that material for something else? We've made these big goals. And of course, now that we've announced them externally, it is absolutely critical we make those goals, if not overshoot them. But there's also a role here for the consumer, I think, to play in helping to, demand from the company, just like the employee and just like the leader is doing. So it's this ecosystem of pressure of, as the consumer continues to voice that preference and that demand, as the leadership of a company, creates big commitments that at times you may not know exactly how you're going to achieve them, but you are in it and you've committed and you're going to make it happen, and the role of the employee. So I think it's this ecosystem of pressure, and of course with policy is another component. But that role of the consumer, I think, is also absolutely critical. And we're seeing companies, and we are ourselves, listening very carefully to what this next generation is telling us, as well as what, of course, the science says.
So I believe we're due to wrap up now. Is that right? Was it on the top of the hour? You guys need to help me out here because. Oh, okay. Well. Let's just keep chatting for a bit longer then. So I personally, my story of my kind of career in environmental reporting is that I reported on environment, climate change until 2017. And then I took a break and went and wrote about politics for 2 years, and now I'm back. And around the time I stopped writing around the time I took a break, China stopped taking the world's recycling waste. And that seems to have had a huge impact on the way we view our own waste. I wonder, June, if you could just talk a bit about, fill me in here. For the last 2 years I've been away, what's been happening? How has that altered the way other countries think about their own recycling, their own waste?
I wish I could say that it has altered the way that they think about their own waste. I'm not sure that that's true, though. So what we saw in the United States and what we saw elsewhere is that once China stopped taking our waste products, and in my own backyard, in the county that collected my recycling material, it just started piling up. And so what we did is we shipped it to the Philippines. In the case of our county, which will remain nameless, we shipped it to Vietnam, and they burned it. They incinerated it. So it was an amazing moment, almost like the COVID-19 moment is giving us right now. It was an amazing moment to say, what can we do with this material? Can we start creating more zero waste communities within our own developed countries, within our own walls, rather than shipping it to other countries like Malaysia and the Philippines and Vietnam and elsewhere, and asking them to handle this trash that China no longer wants? In exchange, we have this wonderful, in addition to the Next Wave Plastics membership-driven entity that we have with Trek and HP and others, we also run this program called the Ocean Heroes Boot Camp. And these are kids from all over the world that come together once a year, and they learn about plastic pollution and campaigns. They're 8 years old to 22 years old. These kids know what their future holds, and they're not standing for it. We held our second boot camp in Vancouver, BC, and while we were there on day one, the Philippines had shipped back to Canada these container ships full of trash from like 5 or 6 years before. So we're starting to see countries say, we don't want your trash. Don't bring it here. You need to take it back and you need to deal with it. I'm not seeing as much leadership from the developing world as I would like to. Sorry, the developed world.
But there's some other really extreme examples. Oh, so go on, Ellen, you say.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, this is our problem, right? We created this trash. We need to figure out what to do with it. We need to evolve to a fully circular economy. I mean, that is the vision. That is the challenge. That is the ultimate challenge that we are facing, that we all have to do. So, with these examples, with what China did, it just put the mirror right in front of our faces. Like, we are creating these products. We have to think about how to take them back, how we make them, to disassemble them, to upgrade them, maintain them, and ensure that product longevity, product life is there. And I think that moment, that action that they took, is essentially good for everyone, because that mirror is facing all of us. It's facing us as companies, it's facing us as individuals when we consume things and we look at the pile that's left over after we've consumed, and what do we do with that pile? Where does it go? That's our responsibility as a consumer, as it is our responsibility as a company who makes it. So we all have a role to play in recognizing the mirror now is facing ourselves as individuals, as companies, as governments. It's time for us to figure out a better way to consume, and that is circular.
Do you think that there's a risk that for all this talk about the circular economy, we focus so much on plastics, we forget other areas of waste that are just as important? John, perhaps you want to talk about that.
I think you got to start at 30,000 feet, and I think you have to start with that the planet is sick, and that the heat on the planet is increasing. It's already increased 2 degrees, and there are some scientists who are saying by the end of the century it could go up 6 degrees, and we're destroying this planet, and it's the only one that we have. So what are you doing about it? And I think that's where government can come in. There's an incredible opportunity. And, one of the things I was thinking about before the program today is, in the United States, why doesn't the EPA come in and rate companies? Why aren't products rated? And, if you want to give consumers more power, we just need a little creativity on behalf of the government. I think you could have a massive difference. We need to, this shouldn't be volunteerism. This shouldn't be HP or Track or, Patagonia doing this. It needs to be everybody. And, I think one of the things, and it was brought up earlier, is, a carbon tax. Until you see a carbon tax, we're not serious. And you're going to have to see some big moves that are up to the task, that are up to the problem that we face. But it can be done. This could be a great moment. And I think we're just, individual companies can do certain things, but I think in the end, we really need the government to act here.
Ellen, I want to ask you about data. We've got a question from one of our audience members, Ivan. He wants to know about, it's a great Bloomberg question as well, we love data, but getting more data transparency into global supply chains. How much difference can that make?
I mean, I think transparency continues to prove, in so many different ways how important, it is a factor to create change. And to be honest with yourself and your customers and your industry and the world, in terms of, what is actually happening. We see that with the pandemic and how important transparency is to the numbers, and it's the same thing in this case. So, for us, we continue to raise the bar on ourselves and to measure things that we haven't measured in the past. We were the first in the industry to publish our carbon footprint. But then we were also the first in the industry to set, comprehensive carbon reduction goals across every area of our footprint. And in this case, in the plastics case, kind of same thing. We published detailed information about the amount of recycled plastic we purchase, and therefore virgin plastic as well. So those are numbers that, again, cause us, when you hold that mirror up, to really look critically at those numbers. And, we all know they're not moving fast enough. So that's why we're doing things in very different ways than we have before. I'm
afraid I'm going to have to stop you there, Ellen, because I think we've run out of time. But it was so great to have a bit of extra time to chat to you all. Thank you so much to my fantastic panel.